You ever see a beautiful app and just wonder, how did it get there? How does a simple idea, maybe just a sketch on a napkin, turn into something you can actually use and enjoy? Well, there's a kind of magic that happens in between, and today we're pulling back the curtain on it.
It really all comes down to this question, doesn't it? You've got this massive gap between a basic wireframe, which is really just the skeleton of a design, and the polished, finished product. So how do you bridge that gap? You need a tool that makes the vision feel real, long before anyone writes a single line of code.
And that's where the mockup comes in. Now, don't just think of it as a pretty picture. A mockup is a detailed, static, but super realistic preview of the final product. We're talking colors, fonts, images, the whole shebang. This is the moment the idea stops being an abstract concept and starts to feel like a real thing.
So let's get into it. If a wireframe is the rough blueprint for our building, the mockup is the detailed architectural plan. This is where we lay all the visual groundwork and start making those concrete decisions about how everything is going to look and feel.
And this right here is so important to remember. The mock-up phase is all about flexibility. It is not about just blindly following that first sketch. It's your chance to refine, to improve, to make things better. If something just feels right on the left side instead of the right, move it. The goal is to make the best possible design, not just stick to the original plan. Okay, so we've got all our pieces, our buttons, our text, our images. Now, how do we arrange them so they make sense? So the screen feels intuitive and not just a chaotic mess. This part is like being an architect for the page. It's all about bringing a sense of order and structure to the design. And to create that order, designers have a toolkit with 3 key principles. First, grids give you a solid foundation. Second, containment helps you create clear, distinct sections. And third, negative space gives everything room to breathe. Let's break each of these down.
First up, grids. I want you to imagine the steel frame of a skyscraper. That's exactly what a grid is for a design. It's this invisible support structure of perfectly spaced lines. A lot of pros swear by something called an 8-point grid system. It just means all your spacing and sizing is done in multiples of 8 pixels. Why? It guarantees that every single element lines up perfectly, creating this amazing sense of harmony. It's the secret sauce for consistency.
All right, next is containment. So if the grid is our building's frame, containment methods are the walls that create the rooms. Simple things, like lines that act as dividers, or putting a border around a section, or even just a subtle shadow. They all act as visual cues. They group related stuff together, which makes the whole interface so much cleaner and easier to navigate. And finally, we have negative space, sometimes called white space. And let me tell you, this is one of the most powerful tools in design, but it's often the most misunderstood. It's not empty space. It's an active ingredient that fights clutter, makes text easier to read, and pulls your eye right to the most important things on the screen. It's like the silence between the notes that makes the music so beautiful. Okay, so our structure is in place. Now it's time to think about the interior design. And that's where typography comes in. The fonts you pick and the way you arrange them, that's what gives your design its voice, its personality, and most importantly, makes it usable. You've seen these little alignment icons in pretty much any design software, right? They might seem small, but wow, are they powerful. A single click can totally change how text flows on the page, creating a clear path for the reader's eye. This is what makes text feel professional, balanced, and just plain easy to read. Next up, let's talk about constraints. Think of them like rules for furniture in a room. They make sure everything fits, no matter how big or small the room gets. So in a design tool, you can tell a button, hey, you are always pinned to the top and to the right. That means that no matter how someone resizes the screen, that button stays put. It's these little rules that make a design look awesome on a giant desktop monitor and on a tiny phone screen. All right, let's wade into a classic design debate. Should you use placeholder text, that lorem ipsum stuff, or the real words? Well, placeholder text is good because it lets you focus just on the layout, but it can really confuse clients. On the other hand, using the real copy means no nasty surprises later, but it might distract people from giving feedback on the design itself. Here's the bottom line. For a high-fidelity mockup, using the real copy is almost always the smarter move. Okay, our structure is solid. The words have a clear voice. Now it's time to paint the picture. Color is what brings a design to life, but it's not just about picking your favorite shades. It's a really strategic tool for setting a mood and telling the user exactly where to look. Color has this direct line to our emotions. A calming blue can feel trustworthy, while a bright red can create a sense of urgency. but it's also functional. Here's a pro tip. Use a simple system. Have one primary color for your most important actions, like the Add to Cart button, then a secondary color for less important things, and a neutral palette for everything else. This system helps users instantly understand what to click and what's most important. It's an art, for sure, but there's a science to it too. Speaking of science, if you remember one number from all of this, please make it this one: 4.5 to 1. That's the minimum contrast ratio for text recommended by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. WCAG is basically the global gold standard for making the web usable for everyone, including people with disabilities. This ratio isn't a suggestion, it's a non-negotiable rule for making sure your design is readable for all. And that brings us to our final and honestly most important section. A beautiful house is completely useless if people can't get through the front door. It's the same with design. Good design is inclusive design. Accessibility isn't something you tack on at the end. It has to be baked in from the very beginning. You see, a huge part of the population has some form of color vision deficiency. And that means if you're relying on color alone to get important information across, your design is fundamentally flawed. A great design has to work for the entire spectrum of human vision. So what's a simple, super powerful way to make your designs more accessible? Here it is. Use icons in addition to color. Think about it. A red X for an error message is way more effective than just a red box, because the shape of the X has meaning all on its own, regardless of how you perceive its color. It's a tiny change that makes a massive impact. And that leaves us with this final question to really think about. As we go from that initial blueprint to the final vibrant reality, are we building an exclusive club that only some people can get into, or are we building an open public space for everyone? Because at the end of the day, the goal of great design isn't just to be beautiful, it's to be usable. And that means usable for all.